Okay, so let's now discuss about activity-based costing example. I will be sharing the technical article, and we have one example in the technical article which helps us to understand the difference between absorption costing and activity-based costing. So as we said earlier, absorption costing absorbs overheads based on a single activity. So either it will be labor hours or machine hours, any of the volume-based activities could be used. Whatever it is, it will be mentioned in the question, and we will use that activity to absorb the overheads. So the example we have right now, we have two products, ordinary and deluxe. The budgeted number of units of each product is given, and marginal cost, which is the variable cost, is also given as a sum of material, labor, and variable overheads. Now, other than that, we have fixed overheads as well. And as we know that inventory is valued at full production cost. So we need to determine the fixed production cost per unit so that it can be charged to each unit of the product, ordinary and deluxe. So what information we have about the fixed overheads? So fixed overheads are a total of 224,000 for the whole period in this particular example. And the basis which is used to absorb the overheads, as you can see, is labor hours. Okay, so we have to look for absorbing the overheads based on labor hours. The total amount of overheads which is being mentioned in the question is 224,000. So effectively, when I'm calculating overhead absorption rate here, I will use the formula budgeted overheads divided by budgeted activity. Budgeted overheads being 224,000, which needs to be divided by the total number of labor hours. Now, labor hours are indirectly given here. They have mentioned that the labor is paid at the rate of 12 per hour. Remember that this 224,000 is a period cost, so I need to determine how many labor hours are required to complete the production of 22,000 units, 20,000 of ordinary and 2,000 of deluxe during the period. So I need to calculate total number of hours. So when I look into the scenario that the labor cost per unit is $60 and the labor rate is 12 per hour. So it gives me that the number of hours required to make 1 unit of the product ordinary is 5 hours. And because we have 20,000 units of product ordinary, so it means that effectively this product would require 100,000 of the labor hours, 20,000 into 5. And also because in the same period, we are going to make another product, which is deluxe. So for deluxe, if I will do a quick calculation, based on the labor rate, cost per unit being 72, it turns out to be 6 hours are required to make 1 unit of product deluxe. And as we know that we have a budgeted number of 2,000 units. So it means effectively we need 12,000 labor hours to complete the production of product deluxe as well. So when we will calculate the overhead absorption rate, so it would be 224,000 divided by 112,000 in total. This would actually give us an overhead absorption rate of, let me clear the screen. So now what we have here is the overhead absorption rate turned out to be $2 per hour. So as we discussed, total overheads divided by the labor hours, the rate turns out to be 2 per labor hour. So in that case, now we have to consider calculating the total cost because marginal cost is already given. So now I am going to charge the portion of fixed overheads here into my total production cost, and that would be based on the rate that I have calculated, overhead absorption rate, multiplied by the labor hours required to make each unit. So since the overhead absorption rate being calculated is 2 per hour, and we were earlier discussing how we calculated the labor hours per unit using the labor rate of 12. So 5 hours are required to make 1 unit of product ordinary, which means a total cost per unit for product ordinary would be 10, And if I will add in total, the full production cost of product ordinary would turn out to be 85. And similarly, as we calculated earlier, 6 hours are required to make 1 unit of the other product. So using the same overhead absorption rate of 2 based on 6 hours, it would be $12 per unit as an indirect cost for product deluxe. And that would turn out to be a total of 102 as a full production cost per unit, right? So let's move on into the example and see what do we have. Yeah, this is what we have discussed. So total cost calculated using absorption costing for each product has been calculated. Now we will move on to the activity-based costing, and we will see that how this calculation will change once we will move to the activity-based costing. And if there will be a significant difference, then we will prefer using activity-based costing as a technique. So definitely moving forward, we would need some additional information as well, as we have discussed about the steps. So all the steps are also mentioned here. So what basically information we need, additional information is about the split of total overhead cost into the each activity of our cost pool. So it has already been identified that out of the total amount of 224,000, here, there are 3 activities involved, and respective cost has been allocated to each activity, and we have been given cost driver data. One of the outcomes that we need to achieve in this topic is identification of cost drivers. So here we have to decide which particular cost driver could better be associated with the activities that are being given. So let's see which one would be more suitable for setup cost. Since batch size is given here, so I would try to relate this batch size with setup cost. Okay, and number of components are given per unit. How many components are required per unit? So that could better be associated with material handling cost. And now we have one more activity, other overheads, which is like, let's say, rent, for example, and others are also there, but there is no specific information available. So we need here an arbitrary basis, you can say, to absorb this activity. And since there is no other information available in the question other than labor hours, so I will assume that labor hours will be used to absorb this other overheads. Okay. So now cost pool is already there. What I need to do is I need to identify the cost driver data for the products which we have. 2 products we have, ordinary and deluxe. So when I look at the batch size as in how many units could be manufactured in one batch. Okay, so if we go back to the previous example number 1, where it was already mentioned that the number of units in total we have for ordinary is 20,000, and each batch size is 2,000. So effectively it means that in order to produce 20,000 units each at a batch size of 2,000, to 20,000 divided by 2,000, we need 10 number of batches for product ordinary, and for deluxe we have 2,000 units to produce, each in a batch size of 100, which would require 20 number of batches. And effectively the total number of batches required, or the setup required, would be 30. And then we move on to the material handling, which is based on number of components per unit. So because we have been informed that total number of units for product ordinary is 20,000, it means that total components required for the production of product ordinary is 400,000, and based on 2,000 number of units for product deluxe, we have 60,000 components for required for deluxe. And in total, so 400,000 for ordinary and 60,000 for deluxe, a total of 460,000. And then rent, as we said, other will absorb on labor hours, and labor hours we have already identified 100,000 labor hours for ordinary and 12,000 labor hours for deluxe, giving a total of 112,000 labor hours. So based on this information, we will now be calculating based on the cost driver data, which is our third step. We will be calculating overhead absorption rate, which is if I will take the total amount of overheads 90,000 and divide it by the total number of setups which we have, and same goes for material handling. 92,000 would be divided by 460,000, and the other cost will be divided 42,000 with 112,000. So as a result, we will end up calculating the overhead absorption rates. So let's move on into the example and see how much is the overhead absorption rate. Overhead absorption rate has been calculated, and it turns out that the overhead absorption rate for setup cost is $3,000 per setup. For material handling, it is $0.2 per component, and for other overheads, it is 0.375 per labor hour. So based on these labor hours, now we will try to calculate the total amount of overheads which could then be absorbed into the product cost. Okay, so if we will take those overhead absorption rates and multiply with what we have earlier identified as the the cost driver data, it would allow us to calculate the total cost, indirect cost related to each product, ordinary and deluxe. So the overhead absorption rates have already been calculated. Using those, I will specifically calculate the total amount of overheads related to setup, store, and other for each product. So I will just do one working, and then you can also relate it with the others as well. Since the overhead absorption rate being calculated for setup is $3,000 per setup, okay, and the number of setups which we calculated earlier required to make this product ordinary is 10. So what I will do is I will simply multiply this overhead absorption rate with number of setups, which is 10. So it would allow us to calculate the total amount of overheads which could be associated with this product ordinary, and same goes for deluxe. So 3,000 per setup into 10, that gives us 30,000, and for deluxe we have 20,000, so it will give us 60,000. And for store, we have 0.2 per component, and total number of components are 400,000. So I think what we are going to get is 80,000 for this one, and 60,000 components. So 60,000 into 0.2, what we will get. And for other overheads also similarly, because the overhead absorption rate being calculated for others was 0.375, so which is when multiplied with the number of hours, we have 37,500 and 4,500 respectively for each of these two. 45. Now we can calculate the total amount of overheads respectively for each of these products. So it turns out that the total overheads are 147,500 and 76,500. $147,500 for this product and 76,500 for the other product. So this is the total amount of overheads, which would then be divided with the number of units. which is 20,000 for ordinary and 2,000 for deluxe. When we divide, we get the indirect cost per unit, which turns out to be 7 and 38.25. 7 and 38.25. Now, this indirect cost per unit being calculated would now be added to the marginal cost, and as a result, we will be able to calculate the full production cost. And let's see, what do we have as a full production cost here? So when this cost, which we have earlier identified for each product, it is added to the marginal cost, variable cost, the total production cost turns out to be 82.375 and 128.25 for deluxe. Now, when we make a comparison, earlier we calculated for absorption costing was 85 and now it is 82. And here also there is a difference. So using activity-based costing, the cost per unit for ordinary is slightly less, and for deluxe it is more, which because as we discussed, if there is a difference specifically in the case of product deluxe, there is significant difference. So we will prefer using activity-based costing because it is more accurate costing technique. The reason being, if our cost per unit is not correct, it could also affect our pricing decision as well. So this is what we have from activity-based costing. Our next topic will be target costing. Again, I will first give you a brief overview and then we will do some practice question as well. So see you next time.